Hi everybody, welcome to Real Rebel. Today I'm going to review Candyman. Candyman came out in 1992 and it's one of my favorite horror films ever. And one of the reasons I want to talk about this movie is there is a new Candyman that's coming out here in 2020 in June, and it's written by Jordan Peele. Now, Jordan Peele also brought us Get Out, which was amazing, and the movie Us, which was also really good. And my main excitement comes from hoping that people will go back and watch the original movie. Candyman stars Virginia Madsen as Helen and Tony Todd as the title character of Candyman. Helen is this grad student who is hell-bent on disproving the theory of Candyman. Now, Candyman is this urban legend, and what Helen believes is that he was invented by residents of the Chicago housing project Cabrini Green in order to give some sort of explanation as to all the violence and the murders that are happening there. So through a series of events, she actually succeeds in disproving the Candyman myth. She finds someone who is posing as Candyman and is going around and murdering people. And so she is just elated. She is so happy because she's got all this evidence to prove her thesis. But then it takes a major sharp turn because what happens? Candyman comes back. Candyman returns because Helen disproved him, and so he needs to come back and prove his existence. And so she becomes the wrongly accused and goes down this tunnel of madness because what Candyman does is he starts murdering people and he makes it look like Helen did it. And so she is now hell-bent on proving that he is a real life figure. And the movie is so good. I first saw this movie when I was 12 years old, and 90s kid. I have no idea. I don't know. Would you let your 12-year-old daughter watch this film today? I don't know. Probably, maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. It depends on your choices. But my parents were cool, and maybe they didn't know what I was watching, but I had a friend over and we went down to the local video store and checked out Candyman on VHS and brought it home and we watched it. And the first thing right off the bat, the music, you are just thrown in, bam, that opening sequence where these gothic letters go across the screen, Candyman, and you're panning over a shot of Chicago with all these cars driving along the highway. It's this beautiful shot, and you just have this gothic music that just pulls you in. And it kind of reminds me of the beginning credits of Psycho, where you just have that orchestra that's just going crazy nuts, and it's like, yeah, this is Psycho. Same thing here. This is Candyman, right, Ash? He's my co-host. Yeah, and maybe you'll get to see him later. I don't know. We'll see. So anyway, so the music is fantastic, and then the setting. As I said before, Cabrini Green is one of the main settings of this film, and I absolutely am fascinated with Cabrini Green. It's really interesting because the crew of this movie had to strike a deal with the gang leaders at Cabrini Green so that they could film there. And in exchange, they allowed these gang members to be extras in the film. So you actually get to see real Cabrini Green residents in the movie, and it's pretty amazing. And it just adds this real world quality to it. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about this movie is that it feels real, doesn't it, Ash? Yeah. It feels real. Helen feels like she's a real person who is trying to prove this theory of hers, that she's actually a student at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And because of that, it makes Candyman feel real. That is one of my favorite things about this film. Now, going into the character of Helen a little bit, It's pretty obvious from the get-go that her husband, who's a professor at her school, is cheating on her. And I believe that Helen is really diving into this whole Candyman business because it's a distraction from her sadness, that she realizes that her husband is not being faithful to her. That's just one of my theories. So another illustration of the setting here is Cabrini Green itself. Now Helen and her fellow student and friend Bernadette, who's also in on this project, they go to Cabrini Green and they end up in the apartment where someone was murdered. And Helen is gathering evidence to show that there actually is a real killer on the loose. And in the midst of all this, a neighbor whose name is Anne-Marie pops in, and she's like, what are you doing? Why are you going through people's things? And Helen tries to explain herself, and so Anne-Marie is, she kind of lets her guard down a little bit, and she invites Helen and Bernadette into her home. And you can see a stark contrast right away. Anne-Marie's apartment in Cabrini Green is cozy. She's got colors on the walls. She's got a little baby. One of the other contrasts is you get to see Helen's apartment, which in the story was built to the exact same dimensions as Cabrini Green because it was supposed to be a project itself. And looking at a map, there's actually some trivia that shows where her apartment was supposed to be located, and it's only a mile away from Cabrini Green. Now, she was on the Gold Coast, and in Chicago, the Gold Coast is a very affluent area. It's right there on Lake Michigan, and it's a beautiful area. And then there was Cabrini Green, basically in its backyard. And Cabrini Green actually was demolished completely in 2011. The last of the high-rises was taken down because of the notorious violence and everything. And that's a whole other fascinating topic in itself, how the people who lived in Cabrini Green were all displaced, and some of them had to be scattered through southern Chicago and western Chicago, and some had to leave Chicago entirely. And that is a totally other video at some point. I find Cabrini Green extremely fascinating. The acting is one of the strongest aspects. All of the aspects of this movie, just go watch this movie. Watch this movie. Why are you listening to me? Well, I hope you are listening to me. And I hope that I'm inspiring you to watch this movie. But the acting and the characters. Virginia Madsen is absolutely stunning as Helen. She is gorgeous. She has this kind of glazed over look that really adds to her falling under the spell of Candyman. I guess originally Eddie Murphy was supposed to play Candyman, and Sandra Bullock was also talked about as playing Helen. And as great as those two actors are, I feel like they're just a little bit too funny. And then there's Tony Todd. Now, Tony Todd was just he's this towering man with this booming voice, and he's extremely seductive, and he just draws Helen in. And I absolutely love villains. If you watch more of my videos that are going to come up, I love villains, and Candyman is one of my favorite villains of all time. I can see why Helen would be drawn to this character. Now, it's not such a good idea to be going out with the Candyman because the dude's full of bees, and man, I'm terrified of bees. And Tony Todd got stung like 23 times, and Virginia Madsen is actually allergic to bees, so they endured a lot. This was before CGI was really a thing. I mean, it existed, but there's absolutely no way that they could have pulled off the CG in '92 to make this look right. So they used real bees, and it's crazy. So as I said before, Tony Todd is beautifully seductive in this. Helen looks at him with this glazed over look. She's pulled in, she's drawn in. Unfortunately, she's kind of framed for these murders because Candyman wants to prove that he's real. And also, there's this whole backstory of how their souls are connected, and that she might be a reincarnate of of the real Candyman when he was actually a human walking around, his love interest, and they were just basically star-crossed lovers. And so there is this whole undercurrent of their relationship, not just in the present, but also their link in the past. And now I want to get to my recommendation portion. So do I recommend this film? Is it worth your time? Is it worth your money? Yes, please watch this movie. I give it 4 cat paws, which means it is great. And just so you know, 4 cat paws means great movie, 3 cat paws means good movie, 2 means disappointing, and 1 means poor. There's a scene where Helen, Bernadette, Trevor, and a professor from the University of Illinois Chicago are all having dinner. Now they finish their dinner, and Trevor, Bernadette, and Helen all light up cigarettes. And it's insane because it was, this isn't a real cigarette, by the way. This is just prop. I don't smoke. So it's crazy that they're smoking, and it's the 90s. They could smoke, whatever. But here's my theory, is that those 3 all end up dead. The professor didn't smoke. He didn't die. Don't smoke. The end. So there's one part of Candyman that I just want to talk about, and that is, it's the turning point of the film where Helen has all this evidence. She's got these pictures. She's just sent the guy who was posing as Candyman to jail. She's going to prove her thesis. She's kind of proving herself. She's walking out to her car. She's excited, and she's about ready to put stuff into her car, and then all of a sudden she hears this, Helen. And a friend of mine pointed out to me that she just turns around, she's just, you hear this, Helen, and she turns around and she's like, yes? Who is that? Now, if someone approached you in a parking garage and was a million miles from you and had this big booming voice and just said, real rebel, would you turn around and just be like, yeah? I don't think so. So anyway, hilarious part. Thanks.